Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out on behalf of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division, New Orleans District, and the cooperating agencies assisting with the preparation of a supplemental environmental impact statement to the 2014 Final Integrated Feasibility Report and Environmental Impact Statement for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction Study. Agencies assisting the Corps with this SEIS are the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, multiple tribes, Louisiana's Department of Natural Resources, Louisiana's Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Louisiana State Historic Preservation Office, and Louisiana's Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. On behalf of the Corps and the above agencies, I want to say thank you for joining us in this important step in the National Environmental Policy Act process, public scoping. During this meeting, we're going to cover several main topics: meeting purpose, project introduction, objectives, the NEPA process, SEIS, opportunities to comment, and conclusion of the public scoping meeting. Overall, as we move through the presentation, it is important to understand that the goals of this public scoping meeting are to 1. Provide brief details on the project, 2. Explain the NEPA process, and 3. Provide instructions on how you could submit your scoping comments. Virtual scoping meeting purpose. A scoping meeting is an early step in the NEPA process by which a federal agency can request input from other agencies and the public to ensure their NEPA document is focused clearly on the issues of greatest concern. Essentially, the scoping process provides information about the project, the NEPA process, and it offers agencies and the public a simple platform to provide comments so that they can be reviewed and addressed properly. The comments provided during this meeting will help determine the scope of issues that we will consider and analyze as we move forward with the development of the SEIS. It is an opportunity for other agencies and the public to help develop a comprehensive range of actions, alternatives, and impacts that will be covered in the SEIS. At the end of this presentation, instructions will be provided on how to share your comments. This presentation, along with other information, is available on the Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District, West Shore Lake Pontchartrain Project webpage. The number and access code for each live event is shown here. Additionally, participants using the internet can go to the Corps West Shore Lake Pontchartrain Project webpage and click on the appropriate link to be directed to the web meeting. From there, questions can be submitted using the chat box and the WebEx online platform. The live event will be recorded and posted on the Corps West Shore Lake Pontchartrain Project webpage. Your participation in our scheduled live event is for informational purposes. Questions or comments providing during this live event do not count as your official scoping comment. Your scoping comments must be submitted by traditional mail, email, or by the phone number as shown here. Who is proposing this project? The Corps is announcing their intent to prepare an SEIS to reevaluate alternatives to compensate for unavoidable impacts to swamp habitat associated with the construction of the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project. A Partisan Budget Act of 2018 Environmental Assessment number 576 identified a plan which included swamp mitigation projects to satisfy the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project mitigation needs. The EA was approved in April 2020, and therefore those swamp mitigation projects are approved for implementation. Cumulatively, those Corps constructed projects could mitigate up to approximately 1,286 average annual habitat units, or AHUs, not including the potential available mitigation bank credits, and would result in a no net loss of wetlands as defined in 33 U.S. Code 2283 and 33 U.S. Code 2317. What is this project? The Maurepas Swamp Project, or MSP, is a 2,000 cubic foot per second freshwater diversion project that was brought to the Corps during public review of the draft EA 576 by Louisiana's Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority for consideration as a mitigation alternative to satisfy the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project mitigation needs for swamp habitat impacted by the construction of the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project. The new SEIS will compare the two MSP alternatives, Alternative 1, which contains public and private land in the benefit area, and Alternative 2, which only contains public land in the benefit area, against the previously identified swamp mitigation BBA alternative for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project using alternatives evaluation and comparison process. The results of the AEC process will be presented in the SEIS. If an MSP alternative is selected as the tentatively selected alternative, or TSA, the SEIS will also serve to clear the construction, mitigation, impact, and study areas that may have impacts. From a NEPA standpoint, a MSP alternative will be cleared just as any other civil works project and studies. Where is this project located? The West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project is located in southeast Louisiana on the east bank of the Mississippi River in St. Charles, St. John the Baptist, and St. James parishes. Study authority. Construction of the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project was authorized as part of the 2016 Water Infrastructure Improvement for the Nation Act. Construction of the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project was funded by the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. Study area. The study area includes the southern portions of the Lake Pontchartrain Basin and the Mississippi Alluvial Plain ecoregion, south of and including the southern Holocene meander belts, which fall below the state coastal zone boundary. The West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project, the BBA swamp projects that comprise the BBA alternative, and the MSP alternatives all fall within the study area. The West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project is located in southeast Louisiana on the east bank of the Mississippi River in St. Charles, St. John the Baptist, and St. James parishes as shown by the yellow polygon on the previous slide. The newly proposed MSP alternatives are located in St. John the Baptist, St. James, Livingston, and Ascension parishes. The MSP alternative analysis of potential impacts takes place at multiple spatial scales as detailed in the polygons shown on the map. Each significant resource is examined on the following spatial scales. 1. The study area, as shown on the previous slide. Diverted Mississippi River water is eventually dispersed throughout the Lake Pontchartrain Basin. 2. The impact area, as shown in the small inset map in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. Diverted Mississippi River water was modeled using Delft 3D model simulations. The resulting impact area estimates the maximum extent of the diversion's influence on parameters such as velocity, water levels, and nutrients. 3. The mitigation area. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's primary, secondary, and tertiary benefit areas comprise the mitigation area. These are the areas where compensatory mitigation benefits will accrue. Alternative 1 contains public and private lands in the benefit area, and Alternative 2 only contains public land in the benefit area. In Alternative 2, expansion of the mitigation area to accommodate the movement off of private land onto solely public land required the identification of a tertiary benefit area beyond the currently identified secondary benefit area. The accrual of benefits in the tertiary benefit area compensates for the removal of private lands and their associated benefits. It is important to note that the likelihood of having measurable benefits that can be attributed to the MSP operation decreases as distance from the outfall increases. This is a risk. Additionally, impacts from the operation of the MSP would occur on both public and private lands in the impact area. And it is possible some sort of real estate agreement, for example, a flowage easement, would need to be considered with private landowners due to the water flowing over their land. And 4, construction area. This purple polygon shows the extent of the construction activity. Now that we have looked at the larger study area, we'll now zoom in and take a look at the MSP alternative features that would be operated to optimize benefits to swamp habitat within the mitigation area. Construction of either MSP alternative would include 3 main groups of features: the conveyance channel, embankment features, and weirs. The conveyance channel will be located on the east bank of the Mississippi River in St. John the Baptist Parish, immediately west of Garyville, Louisiana, at River Mile 144 above head of passes. The construction corridor for the conveyance channel extends from LA 44 or River Road northward. It extends northward for 5.5 miles, terminating approximately 1,000 feet north of Interstate 10 at the outfall channel. The majority of the open conveyance channel, excluding vehicular and railroad crossings, is a 40-foot to 60-foot excavated channel bottom tightly positioned between a guide levee on the west and the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain levee and eyewall system on the east. Both banks along the channel are compacted fill material and have a 1-to-4 slope. The embankment cuts. These would be established north of the conveyance channel in the northern part of the swamp. The cuts would occur along an existing old railroad embankment ridge. Water must be circulated throughout the swamp to reestablish the vitality of the wetland vegetation. Water movement into the northwest corner of the swamp is restricted by an embankment that was constructed decades ago to support a defunct cypress logging railroad spur. To establish the cuts, approximately 7.5 acres along the old railroad embankment would be cleared for equipment access. 5 individual areas along the embankment would be excavated to existing grade to allow for water flow, while all spoil will be placed in 20 individual areas along the embankment. It is anticipated that no material will be removed from the construction area. To improve hydraulic retention time in the swamp, and thus improve the health and the severely distressed wetland vegetation in the northern portion of the swamp, weirs would be placed at Bayou Secret and Bourgeois Canal. These weirs are features that would serve to retain a portion of the flow for sufficient time to ensure water dispersion throughout the swamp. Zooming in even more allows us to view the features associated with the intake channel, which would be roughly 400 feet long by 200 feet wide, with a bottom depth of -4 feet in NAVT 88, excavated into the Batur to route flow from the Mississippi River into the diversion headworks. This channel would be lined with riprap to prevent scour. The diversion headwork structure would include a multi-cell box culvert with vertical lift gates, or sluice gates. The primary function of the headwork structure is to convey flow from the intake channel underneath the Mississippi River levee. And finally, here is a close-up of the previously mentioned embankment cuts, which would be established north of the conveyance channel in the northern part of the swamp. As stated, the cuts would occur along the existing ridge of an old railroad embankment. Water must be circulated throughout the swamp to reestablish the vitality of the wetland vegetation. Now we will review the projects that comprise the BBA alternative. EA 576 recommended purchase of mitigation bank credits and construction of new swamp habitat to compensate for swamp habitat that will be lost due to the construction of the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project. The West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project compensatory mitigation plan approved through EA 576 and its FONSI is the Corps' current West Shore Lake Pontchartrain approved plan to compensate for swamp impacts. The West Shore Lake Pontchartrain approved plan would be a combination of mitigation bank credit purchases and Corps constructed projects in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin that would meet the compensatory mitigation need of approximately 955 AHUs of coastal zone swamp for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project. A brief description of the proposed Corps constructed projects follows. BBA mitigation St. James Swamp Restoration in St. James Parish, Louisiana. The proposed project involves restoration of up to approximately 1,247 acres of swamp habitat and provides up to approximately 511 AHUs as compensatory mitigation for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project swamp impacts. The proposed mitigation acreage could change after cultural surveys are completed. The swamp mitigation area would be located in existing agricultural fields at the St. James mitigation site. This site is located off the Mississippi River between the towns of Romney and Union, Louisiana, around New Corp Plant in St. James Parish. BBA mitigation, Pine Island Swamp Creation Restoration, St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. The proposed project involves creation restoration of up to approximately 1,965 acres of swamp habitat and provides up to approximately 755 AHUs as compensatory mitigation for West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project swamp impacts. The swamp mitigation area would be located in shallow open water areas on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain. This site is located southwest of the town of Madisonville, adjacent to the Tchefuncte River in St. Tammany Parish. Objective. The main objective is to provide approximately 955 AHUs of compensatory mitigation for swamp habitat impacted by the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project, meaning approximately 600 AHUs associated with the direct impacts and approximately 355 AHUs associated with indirect impacts to swamp habitat. The SEIS will address a reasonable range of alternatives based on the purpose and need. The SEIS will compare the previously identified BBA alternative for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project as described in EA 576 to the newly proposed MSP alternatives by using the AEC process. The results of the AEC process would be presented in the SEIS. The BBA alternative would be a combination of mitigation bank credit purchases and core constructor projects that would meet the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project compensatory mitigation need of approximately 955 AHUs. The MSP alternatives will compensate for West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project impacts by each providing approximately 955 AHUs. There would be an additional approximate 55 AHUs of impacts to swamp habitat as a result of the construction of the MSP that would be self-mitigated by the operation of the diversion. The approximate 295 AHUs of coastal zone bottomland hardwood wet habitat impacted by the construction of the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project would be mitigated in accordance with EA 576. The approximate 30 AHUs of coastal zone bottomland hardwood wet habitat impacted by the construction of the MSP would be mitigated in accordance with EA 576. The SEIS would provide an assessment of the proposed alternatives, meaning the BBA alternative and the two MSP alternatives, to compensate for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project swamp impacts, and it would identify a tentatively selected alternative, or TSA. When unavoidable impacts occur, the Corps is required to offset those impacts through compensatory mitigation by replacing the lost habitat's functions and services equally and in kind. Compensatory mitigation is required by the Water Resources Development Act of 1986, Section 906 as amended, and by the Clean Water Act, Section 404B1 guidelines. What is NEPA? The National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, was signed into law by President Nixon on January 1, 1970. NEPA requires all federal agencies to consider the environmental impacts of any proposed action by developing a range of alternatives, provide opportunities for the public to provide input, and document the decision-making process so that interested and affected stakeholders can understand how the agency came to a decision. Implementation requires the publishing of a notice of intent in the Federal Register for an environmental impact statement, and sometimes for an environmental assessment. The National Environmental Policy Act is a law that requires federal agencies to to evaluate environmental impacts before making decisions on any major federal action. What are the goals of NEPA? Assist federal agency officials with making well-informed decisions, and to ensure the public and other agency involvement in decision-making. How will the Corps comply with NEPA? By acting as the lead federal agency in the drafting of an SEIS for the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project. What is an EIS? An EIS is a document required under NEPA for actions that could significantly affect the quality of the human environment. An EIS is also a tool for decision making. An SEIS is a NEPA document that supplements a previously approved NEPA document or decision. Reminder, as mentioned in the intro, the Corps is preparing a SEIS to the previously approved 2014 West Shore Lake Pontchartrain EIS. This is being done to evaluate the newly proposed MSP alternatives. An EIS is comprised of the following main components. Purpose and need. What is the purpose of this project? What is the goal trying to be achieved? Why is this project needed? Is there a reasonable, foreseeable need for the proposed project? Note the public scoping process, which we are in now, is covered in more detail on the next slide. And this generally takes place between the development of the purpose and need and the development of the alternatives. Alternatives. What alternatives would be looked at in the EIS? A no action alternative, proposed action, and a reasonable range of alternatives. This is usually informed by the public scoping process. Affected environment. What are the baseline conditions of the human and natural environment that could potentially be affected? Also informed by the public scoping process. Environmental consequences. How will building, operating, and maintaining this project affect those baseline conditions of the human and natural environment? Note, the public will also be given an opportunity to respond to the draft SEIS once the above steps are complete. Public scoping. The public scoping process is an early and open phase in the EIS process, intended to provide interested or affected parties an opportunity to express concerns, ideas, and comments, which will inform and identify the issues and alternatives analyzed in the EIS document. Your comments are welcomed and encouraged. This meeting is not the only opportunity for public involvement. Public scoping lasts from August 13th, 2021 to October 31st, 2021. Your feedback throughout public scoping will be incorporated into the SEIS scoping report. Potential issues. The SEIS will analyze the potential impacts on the human and natural environment resulting from the TSA, the scoping, public involvement, and interagency coordination processes will help identify and define the range of potential significant issues that will be considered. Important resources and issues to be evaluated in the SEIS could include, but are not limited to, the reasonable, foreseeable effects on tidal wetlands and other waters of the U.S., aquatic resources, commercial and recreational fisheries, wildlife resources, essential fish habitat, water quality, cultural resources, geology and soils, hydrology and hydraulics, air quality, marine mammals, threatened and endangered species and their critical habitats, navigation in navigable waters, induced flooding, employment and incomes, land use, property values, tax revenues, population and housing, community and regional growth, environmental justice, community cohesion, public services, recreation, transportation and traffic, utilities and community service systems, and cumulative effects of related projects in the study area. To submit comments will be accepted through October 31st, 2021. They can be sent to the mvnenvironmental@usas.army.mil email address, or the physical address of U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Regional Planning Environmental Division South, PDS-C, 7400 Leake Avenue, New Orleans, Louisiana 70118, or through the number shown on the slide below, and also through the project website.